Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about the power of accountability and how building strong relationships can benefit your business and your life. Accountability has been such a crucial thing in my personal life, and I want to share with you how I've been able to build that accountability and how you can do that for yourself. Now, essentially, the fundamental question that I was asking myself was, how can I be more effective? How can I truly get the success that I believe that I deserve? And, obviously you find this through various different means. You may be reading different books, you may speak to different people, you may watch videos, you may listen to podcasts. There's all this different stuff. But sometimes this stuff is just noise. Sometimes these are ways to find excuses to not take action. I'll never knock learning. I think learning is very important. You have to be able to find information, assimilate information, especially if it's information that you want to learn about, and just really absorb it. But what's more important is if you embody that information. So it's finding ways to translate knowledge and information into action, into results, because it's not just about action. You're seeking the result so that you can use that to inform your understanding. That's the whole point. I've said this so many times. Life is one big fat experiment. And so you get to decide what your hypothesis is. Once you have that hypothesis and you have your objectives and method and everything, you need to take implementation. You need to take action, mass imperfect action. I heard that many years ago on some digital marketing video, probably like 10, 15 years ago, whatever. Well, maybe not 15, but about 10 years ago. And that has rung true so many different times. Mass imperfect action is key. One of the best ways to do this is through accountability, okay? Now, in my mind, there are two forms of accountability. There's accountability to self, and there's accountability that's been created by others. And that accountability can be created by default. So sometimes, accountability is created based on the role that you have. So if you're a father or mother, you are in some ways in your mind accountable for the development, the growth of your children, whether that's legally or biologically, should I say, or psychologically. Okay, these are all different things. Accountability may come if you're in a romantic partnership. Okay, so wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it may be. The man will feel responsible, accountable to some degree, and the woman will be, accountable, responsible to some degree. So again, this exists anyway. But when it's intentional, it's like, how do you create the environment? How do you get the right people to enable that to happen? I'm going to read this African proverb. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And you usually go on a journey together with someone if you like them or if you have similar values or ideals. And so bearing this in mind, you have to be able to find people who match you in some way, in some form of intentional way, in order for you to move forward. It's very important. You have to be very selective. Okay. Now, again, I told you I started thinking more about my goals and all of that kind of stuff there. And really, there were two main big goals, okay? Two main big goals. Number one, I wanted to build a business that supported the lifestyle and vision that I had for my future, okay? And I'm still on that journey, but definitely accelerated in many ways because of this whole environment and process. And number two, it was being in the body that I love. Not quite there yet, if I'm honest with you. And the focus has been more on the building the business part. And, you have to ask yourself, like, do I have too many goals? That's the reality of the situation. What am I willing to sacrifice? I mean, in my whole life navigation or life management system process, I have 4 different categories, which are surrounded around performance, progress, people, and personal. And so far, my focus is more on progress as opposed to performance. So progress is all centered around wealth generation, business, career, portfolio careers, all of that kind of stuff there. Whereas performance is more focused on the health aspect. It doesn't mean I'm neglecting that stuff. It just means that's what I'm prioritizing. Okay. Now, there's been many different parts of my life that have been ticked off, if you want to call it that. And you can watch my previous videos that I released pretty much this week where you can find out more information about that stuff. But the reality is these are big cornerstone goals. These two main big things. These are life-changing, transformational goals that will set you on track. And so it makes sense for me to have an accountability buddy or buddies or group for this stuff. Okay. And so essentially, I got these people in. Now, I want to talk about different accountability buddies that I've had and all that kind of stuff there, so you can get a visual. So I'm not just like spitting knowledge and then, you're getting information that way, but you should be getting information to help you understand how you can move forward as well. So my first ever accountability buddy was somebody I met at a property network event. Okay, so they were teaching us how to make money with property and all this kind of stuff there. This was back in 2016. And they said to me, hey, would you want to be an accountability buddy? And this was so apt because I was reading the book Think and Grow Rich. If you haven't read that book, and I'm sure you've probably heard of that book, just sit down and read it. Okay, Napoleon Hill has many different books which are great reads, and they really get into the intricacies and the nuances of the mind and how to really respond orientated towards success. Like, great book, man. So I was reading that book and it was talking about the mastermind, and he was talking about how he would imagine, different key figures in history who would sit around this table with him, really sort of like chopping it up and just having debates or philosophical understandings around how to approach life. But why not do that in real life? And so when she said this, I was like, yeah, I'm down. I'm here for it. And I think she was surprised. Okay. And so we met up in Victoria in a coffee shop. And I think we met up it was either every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. And we both wanted to write a book. Okay. We had both gone to an event prior to that, and we learned how to write books. And there was a decision to either go with this person's package or whether you wanted to do it yourself. And she decided to go via the package route. I decided to do it myself because I just wanted to know I could write a book myself and have that skill for life. And so we sat down and we would talk about what our strategy and plan was when it came to writing out this book. Okay, how we were going to structure everything, what we were going to talk about, what were our next steps, how can we make sure that we're getting stuff done. And we would be critical, but in a very empathetic way. And so it really comes down to understanding that if you have the right person, they can push you in the right direction. Now, the reality of the situation was, even though they had their paid package and everything else, and they had their own complications, which I'm not going to get into because it's personal to them, I started to overtake them in terms of output. I was getting stuff done. I was hungry to write. And for those of you who know my story, I ended up writing 10 books instead of one, okay, in terms of a manuscript. This is all in like 10 and a bit months. And so, yeah, I was really typing, fam. I was really writing. And so with that in mind, like, it got to a point where it was like, can I keep this person as an accountability buddy? They had been going through some stuff. Unfortunately, some things happened in their family. It didn't make sense. And even if things are a bit sensitive, or the person close, or well, whatever it may be, you have to have the right empathetic objectivity, if you want to call it that. So flexing your psychological muscle, as they call it in psychology, this is where you're able to look outside in and make a decision and communicate that in a way that is helpful and not dishelpful. So essentially, we kind of made an agreement to not continue with this because it wasn't working anymore. And it was interesting because I was telling someone else, it was a friend, basically how pivotal these accountability sessions were. And so I was kind of like recruiting someone, but not recruiting them actively at the same time. And all of a sudden they were just like, oh, I'll be your accountability buddy. And I was like, yeah, it couldn't have been a better time, so to speak. And so we went on our journey. And that journey lasted probably for about 3 years or so. 3 years of solid accountability. We would catch up every 2 weeks, and we did it properly. We did it very well. We didn't use anything fancy like Notion or Trello at the time. I think Notion may have just come out, or we may have just missed the boat there. I know Trello was around, but we decided to just use Google Sheets. We're both good with Excel. And so essentially what we had on the first page was clear objectives, clear outcomes that we wanted to achieve on how we were going to determine whether we've achieved those outcomes based on the metrics that we were measuring. And then after that, there was a table for each month, which basically tracked what the specific task was we were trying to achieve, what we learned, what we did, and all of that kind of stuff there. Okay, so I want to say that again. We had the task, we had who it was for, we had the date, we had what we actually did, and what were our lessons learned from that. And what we would do, we would give each other an hour each to talk. Some people may be like, that's a lot of time, but it was useful because even when I didn't want to do stuff, I knew if I did not get this done, I was coming back another week saying, oh, I wasn't able to do it, this and that. And that's okay, only if you're being true to yourself. And I'll tell you why that's okay. Because if you realize that you're not ready or the goal is not right, then you can make some changes. That's the intelligence that you need. Because sometimes we may pick something that's so big, and it's not because it's big that it's wrong, but it's more so because you realize you're not ready, then you need to do some inner work. It's that simple. I know they say go for big goals and everything else. I think it depends where you're at. Sometimes smaller goals are better. Sometimes the goal is to work on yourself. Sometimes it is a big goal. You need to really be clear and intelligent and intuitive and authentic to self. That's the best way to do this. And so what these accountability sessions did was fine tune that realness. Okay. And if this person, cares for this whole relationship that you've built, they're going to want to push you on. And they're going to be like, well, you said this, so how come it's not done? But why? Sometimes you're going to feel a bit uncomfortable. And so that uncomfortability really, really helped. But the reality is there's no point putting down goals that are not going to move the needle. What do I mean by this? For the longest time, a lot of the goals that I put on there were business related, personal brand related, health related, but that didn't really move the needle. Again, as you know from the previous videos, if you've watched them, essentially what was going to move the needle for me was getting out of debt. That was it. And the reality is, I saw that if that didn't happen, then all of this was going to take time. It just was. And it's not even because I didn't have the money or whatever it may be. Mentally, I just wasn't there because I was thinking about that. And so sometimes the accountability isn't always achieving the goal. Sometimes the accountability is realizing the reality of the situation. And sometimes that's why accountability buddies break down. Now, whilst I had this accountability buddy, I formed another relationship with somebody else. Okay. This was through Instagram. And this was a beautiful relationship. I can't lie to you. It was very healthy. I think we met up once a month. And then obviously the pandemic hit and we kind of understood what we were about. They were a bit more cryptic with their stuff. I can't lie to you. They're very cryptic with what they were doing. It wasn't necessarily as clear, but there was an appreciation and there were the right coaching questions to enable you to understand how you wanted to move forward, because you knew in a month's time, you wanted to give back the right information. So you can see there's a theme there. There's a theme there in terms of wanting to provide the right information. And so essentially, what ended up happening with these two relationships is that the latter one ended. It definitely ended, okay? And the reason it ended is because they realized actually for them, it wasn't going to work out. They wanted to pivot and focus on something else. Now that kind of ended informally. It's not officially ended, but it has ended. You know, when things have just died and it is what it is, it's not you, it's me, that sort of thing. And so with the former one, because they're an active member in my life, it's a different dynamic. We're not as robust anymore. And it's just more of a catch-up situation. So you could argue, where is the accountability gone if those things are not as active anymore? Well, before I get onto that, I want to talk about a different type of accountability that I had. So, of course, one form of accountability that I had that was close to the first ever accountability buddy I ever had back in 2016 was the mastermind group. Spun off from that, especially from reading the book Think and Grow Rich, I developed a mastermind group. And I wanted to handpick who that was going to be. And that was going to be friends or family members within my circle who were doing things. So we had someone who was a lawyer. We had someone who had a travel business. We had someone who had a music magazine business. We had someone who had a football academy. We had someone at the time, and they left very quickly, who had a fashion business. You had obviously coaching and everything else. Like there was a whole mix. It was nice, colorful. We had property as well. We had investing at the time. We had someone who was building apps. It was good. It was a solid 8 people. Okay, and some people were surprised that they weren't invited into this group, and they thought they could just work their way in. No, there are some people who tried. I just met them. I think it was back in 2018 or so, doing big things, has the ego, the personality, all this kind of stuff there. And they would ask, and I said, no, yeah, you're cool, but so what? You have to be the right type of person, and the right level of trust needed to be built. I needed to get that vibe. This wasn't for just anybody. This was going to take time. This is something I would see for the future, all of that kind of stuff there. And so at the beginning, I tried to mold this mastermind group a certain way, where people would come and share their learnings, or people would come and teach something, or I would sort of like record everything down on minutes and all the, it was unnecessary. It was all long. And I was getting upset myself because people did not comply. And what I mean by that is people did not show the level of engagement on the WhatsApp group. People were quiet at times. Like it was a lot of hard work. And a year in, I was like, I'm gonna stop this, man. And I sent a really clear, straight to the point, brutal message to the group saying, fam, this ain't gonna work. This is not gonna work. This is not happening. This is not happening. This is not happening. You're wasting my time. I'm just gonna focus on myself. And they're all like, no, don't do that, don't do that. Like, this is really good. And then they all started pouring their heart out in terms of how good it was and all this kind of stuff there. And I was just like, what? For people who don't talk, this is how you're feeling. So it felt like it was dependent upon me. That's what it was. It was dependent upon me and maybe one other friend, who was, he gets the etiquette. Do you understand? We have the same sort of mindset. And he knew about how I was feeling and stuff. Like, there was no value apart from that. So I was like, this needs to change up. I'm not trying to be too rigid. The issue is that I was being too rigid. So at least with the first type of accountability, with the, one other person, you can be a bit rigid. But when it comes to the mastermind group, it's a bit different. Like, you have to be a bit more flexible, okay? And this is where my facilitation and coaching skills came into play much more. So what the mastermind groups ended up being was a monthly sort of session on Google Meet. And it was literally, people would say if they can go or not. That was a whole other thing because people would just rock up and not say anything. But essentially, it was everyone going around for about 20 to 25 minutes, okay? Really giving their update and being asked questions that will either challenge them, support them, or even provide feedback or give information and resources. So everyone had their own time. Sometimes it was 15 minutes, sometimes it was 10 minutes, but everyone had their turn. So if you think about it, if it was, say, let's say, for example, 20 minutes and there's 8 of us, that's 2 hours and 40 minutes. So there were roughly 3 hours if you had the whole, like everyone there. But everyone wasn't always there. At most, maybe we had 5 or 6, which is perfectly fine. And so this lasted for about another 3 years or so. It was magical. I'm not going to lie to you, because you always left feeling motivated and inspired. And you're just like, wow, this is amazing. And you could clearly see growth. Like, the person who said they were going to get into property, they ended up getting 2 properties. Another person who wanted to get into property, they got a property. The person who had the football business, their thing boomed and they started making crazy money, like grands a month. The person who was developing the app, their app was actually developed. There's all that stuff with my stuff. I was getting more coaching clients. Like, there's all this stuff that was happening and you could clearly see the growth. And whether I thought that was a direct relationship to the mastermind group or not is questionable. But there is some level of influence at some level. I knew, and other people said, they left with a sense of motivation and inspiration. okay, to take action. And so obviously little groups formed as well. People started to talk to different people. People met up. There was synergy. It was fantastic. And so that was a truly inspiring time. So that started in 2017. And unfortunately, it had to be closed down in 21 or 22. So that's a pretty long time. That's what, 5 years or so? 5 years of solid masterminding. And it shut down mainly because of the pandemic. You know, things changed in terms of people's commitments, efforts, engagement levels. Kind of went back to what it was before in some ways. I didn't give this whole explanation. I just shut the group. But I'm all very blessed with everyone. Do you know what I mean? It's all good. There's no love lost at all. And so you can see where some of these benefits are. Again, other types of accountability I've had as a coach. Okay. I've had a few coaches in my life. So there are two different types of coaches that I've had. I've had the coach/mentor. Well, three different types. So number one, I've had the program style type where you've had to pay crazy amounts of money to get into this program and have someone walk you through how to do something. I've done lots of that stuff. That's why I got into that crazy debt, and you can watch that video to find out more if you haven't learned about that. The second type of accountability that I've had is just a simple coach. Someone who isn't like, this is what you do. Okay, so when I say coach, I'm talking about a traditional coach. Someone who essentially follows my line of inquiry based on the topic that I'm bringing to the session, as opposed to we're just focusing on business, we're just focusing on this and this is how you do it. And that second type of coach really helps you to create a fruitful garden in your mind, as opposed to just growing weeds. It helps you pluck out the weeds so that your plants can grow, like mentally, psychologically, all of that kind of stuff there. That type of accountability is different, because they will be able to use creative insights, creative models, great effective questioning, powerful questions, effective listening or deep listening to help you with your thinking. It helps you clean your mind, so to speak. And so that type of coach is fantastic, okay? And luckily, I've known a few people, especially within the career space, where I was able to get that service. I was really good. Obviously, when I did my coach training I was able to, develop relationships with other coaches, and they were very helpful too. So that form of accountability is different. The last type of accountability is more informal, and within the sort of contracting space, that came through, my friends and mentor at the time when it came to contracting, who really sort of explained to me how things worked. There was another guy who was also very open with what he was saying and just sharing a lot of wisdom. And we would meet every so often. It wasn't it was very informal, but you could clearly see the hierarchy. I mean, again, I said this before, he sees me as someone wise and his mentor, but I'm like, nah fam, it's definitely you for me, at least anyway. And so these are the different types of things. You have to identify this stuff. And I know lots of people have all these different names for different types of mentors and all. That kind of doesn't matter. You just need to know who can help you. Who can help you and how can you help them back? Sometimes helping them back is producing a result, because it kind of fills their ego in a way. Okay? Everyone says, altruism exists or doesn't exist, whatever, but that's not the point. The point is it kind of helps them feel like they've done a good deed. So those are the different types of accountability when it comes to that one-to-one relationship. The final type that I've used personally is really through creating a system. Okay? It's really through creating a system. And that system has really been developed using things like Notion. Okay, so I might sort of like share my sort of space so you can see it for yourself. And again, I talk about this in previous videos. If you ever want to sort of like get the life management system that I use in Notion, then feel free to get it in the link below, because it's been so useful to me. Okay, it's been so useful to me. So essentially, especially this year, I made it a thing to make sure that I journaled every single day. I don't do it every day now. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't want to act like I journal every day when I don't. However, that sort of like setup really put me in a situation where I could really see what I was thinking. And it really helped me be truthful to self. And so let me just give you an example so you can see. Okay, so this is my life navigation system that I talk about. And again, you can see all this stuff here. But essentially, I split it into all of these sections. And I'm not going to go into all of these sections. You can check it out for yourself if you want to get it. But essentially, I go through a process of priming. So what do I really want for the year? And again, it gives a bit of explanation in terms of what that looks like. I go through pulse management, which is essentially an action log, a Kanban board that keeps me on track, but is synced to everything else. Like the way I've done it is really good. Okay, if I do say so myself. And again, it talks about this stuff. This is the journaling section as well. And of course, I've got certain routines I'm tracking. So not habits, but routines that I'm tracking. In addition to just capturing the qualitative thoughts that pop up in my mind and asking myself certain questions, or just free writing. Okay. Was I capturing like successes and challenges? Yes. All of that kind of stuff there. My lessons learned. This is all very useful. And then also there was the planning element. So this really looking at the different areas of my life and thinking to myself, okay, how am I going to achieve X? How am I going to achieve Y? This is essentially what I was doing. And so as you can see here, okay, obviously I haven't gone into it deeply. As you can see here, there's a really, really good breakdown of creating accountability, not just for one thing, but different areas within my life, like different areas. So again, if there's something you're interested in, again, you can check out the link below. But the point I'm making is that having that routine and that rhythm really put me in a space of accountability. I was accountable to self, no one else. And I feel like deep down, that's one of the best versions. If anything, you need to start there. There has to be enough will, and you need to carry that willpower with some sort of system that can do the heavy lifting for you. Now, of course, initially it takes a bit of work to get into that routine, but once you're in that routine, it's perfectly fine. And the reason why I don't journal every day anymore is because, for number one, again, unless you understand this coaching model, I'm not really going to explain it, but because I'm in a state of hyper doing, so to speak, like doing a lot, and this is just couple goals basically, my mind is focused on pure action at the moment. Okay, it's not focused in the state of pure beingness or bliss. I'll come back to it, but right now I'm not going to. And number two, what was the second point? The second point being is it became a chore. It became a chore. And that only happens when you're in that state of doing. But when you're removed from that state and you're a bit more free, it's different. So it's finding the balance between getting stuff done, but having the freedom to live your life. This is why I'm just shooting videos. I'm not editing. I'm not doing any stuff. I'm just literally doing it on the day and then boom, that's that. Well, yeah, that's what I'm doing now, at least anyway. And so you have to decide where you're at. You have to decide, what does accountability to self look like? So you can see there are different domains. There's accountability to self, which starts with self-awareness and self-management, which is part of the emotional intelligence model. You can check out my video on that as well. The second layer is an accountability buddy, I would say, with someone or something, okay? And the layer that is aligned to that is also accountability from a coach, mentor, therapist, someone informal, X, Y, and Z. So that's that one-to-one relationship. And then the layer from that is through our mastermind group, okay, as an example. Or some sort of like program or whatever it may be where you're amongst many other people. So you can have all of these. And there were times where I had all of these things. I don't have all of these things right now because that's not where I'm at in terms of my life. I've surpassed certain things and reached certain goals where I'm happy enough to just focus on self. I don't need anyone else doing X, Y, and Z. But I'll talk about how I'm still managing accountability in a second with other people. And so if any of these are attractive, start them up yourself, or you can join other people. Now, coming back to where I said, I still have a level of accountability, that is through my business. So Currently in my business, Mastery Group, which questions how good you want to be, which is a coach training consultancy focusing on professional and personal development. I have some volunteers, basically friends and family, who are supporting the cause, who are working on different areas. Now, of course, the hub of my business is centered around, again, the personal and professional development through programs that we offer. Okay. So these programs may be centered around leadership or professional development or emotional intelligence or portfolio careers, whatever it may be. There's a whole flurry of different stuff. But there's at least one person who's consistent, at least one. And there is another person, but I'm going to say at least one who's been solid throughout, where we meet on a weekly basis, twice a week. And essentially we sit down and we carry out tasks in relation to mastery. You could argue, what's in it for them? Well, what's in it for them is knowledge, implementation, and really the ability to take stuff and pull it into what they're doing and make it their own. Of course, if they're doing that properly, okay? Not in some like steely way. What's in it for me is somebody who's helping me and double the efforts, and somebody who is motivating and, really infusing the whole business to move forward. That's what's in it for me. And so sometimes the transaction needs to be clear in terms of who's getting what, even if it is quote unquote, it feels a bit unbalanced. That's the reality of the situation. But if it's a thing, which I do have and sometimes have, where it's like you're doing everything and there's always a situation where they're waiting for you to do stuff, that's difficult. And to some degree, that's always going to kind of happen, but it's not enough because you're the person who's suffering. And so it's no wonder why people have started these one-person businesses or just do contracting or whatever it may be, because it's very hard to work with people, especially if it's initially voluntary. Really the real equalizer, which is not really accountability, but more getting stuff done, is to pay people to do stuff. And I did have that during the pandemic. I had a VA. They were fantastic. But unfortunately, they were hit by something that happened in their country. There was a terrible disaster that happened. So we didn't have that person anymore. And I was in a situation where I had to be very careful with how I was moving with my finances. And so with that in mind, you need to decide, okay, based on the lifestyle that I'm trying to create, what type of accountability, based on what I'm saying or any other forms, are you happy to use? Now, I know there are apps and things where you can sit online with people and do work, whether they're random and all this kind of stuff. There are loads of these different things there. But don't just rely on the apps. I feel like sometimes we find excuses and ways to not just get started straight away. There are people all around you and you have to be creative. Whether it was an event that you went to, whether it is a friend that you have. And sometimes I advise against friends. It depends what type of friend it is, because not everyone sees your vision or focus or intentions. You just need to make that decision, okay? And so where can you find accountability buddies? Let me just go through this list quickly. So close friendships, like I said, it doesn't necessarily always work, especially if they're the closest, because you start to get emotionally attached, or you are emotionally attached to that person. Therefore, you get let off the hook, or it may sort of like flare up unnecessarily. At least if it's with somebody you don't know or you have a kind of neutral relationship with, there isn't that sort of like weirdness that exists. Okay, you have to keep it profesh. There's also community groups like church or the mosque or the synagogue or temple or scouts, brownies, the gym, whatever it may be. All of these different community places are ways in which you can find accountability. It just takes for you to speak to people. Maybe it starts off with a smile. Maybe it's you going to an after school club or whatever it may be, and just basically getting to know the person, understanding their ideals and values and what they're trying to achieve, and then saying, hey, do you know what? I really love what you had to say. This is what I'm looking to do. How about we just meet up on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and just keep each other accountable? What does that look like to you? Simple. I just made this up off the bat. It doesn't have to be anything special. Say it how you need to say it. There's also social media acquaintances and friendships and stuff. And so there are loads of people we've met on Instagram, maybe even TikTok, LinkedIn, definitely. And again, it takes that bravery to have that conversation. I wouldn't just DM them. I'll probably invite them for a virtual sort of like video call or whatever it may be, And as you're talking to the person, you're just kind of like deciding, okay, cool. Is this person right for me for an accountability buddy session? Maybe one session's not enough. Maybe you have to have 2 or 3 little catch-up calls, because they're kind of accountability in itself. Maybe you could say, it'd be good to catch up again, maybe in a month's time or something, just see how things are going and stuff. Keep it casual. And then if you're happy with what's happening and you're not blindsided in any way, because people know how to put on their actor face, they're not even doing it on purpose at times, but people self-monitor. Then you can say after the second or third session, do you know what? I really love where this is going. I think we should hold each other to account for what we're doing. Like, do it properly. Like, what's your thoughts? And then they may say, what does do it properly mean? And then you spread your ideas based on maybe some of the stuff I've said in this video. So it's totally up to you. There's also work colleagues. You should always air caution with this, but it has to be that sort of work colleague who's on, making sure that, yeah, you're on job as well, and who loves you as a friend, so to speak. It doesn't have to be that deep, but there has to be a genuine wantness to want to see you succeed. That's really important. I've spoken about apps and social media, so you can bear that in mind. And I actually have my Masteri Academy, where again you can find people and create accountability there. I'm not as active on it anymore, if I'm honest with you. However, there are people on there that you can message and again form that accountability with. There's also business relationships. I'm not going to get into all of that. That's pretty self-explanatory. If you're in a business relationship that perfectly makes sense, then yes, that makes sense. And I think that leans into the whole social media thing in a way, because it will probably be the same or similar sort of like setup. I've spoken about programs and events that people have met at mutually. The reason why those are pretty good is because 9 times out of 10, not all the time, these people may have similar goals or values and ambitions to you. They may not be the same level of I'm going to get this done sort of mentality, but they're looking to achieve something because they attended that event. Attending that event is evidence of that. So maybe you want to get in touch with those sorts of people and chop it up and see how they're going. Don't just get one for getting one's sake. It has to feel right. It has to feel right. Okay? And so if you can't find all this stuff, set it up yourself. This is why I always say, if you can't find all of this stuff, set it up yourself. That's the most important thing. Now, what are some of the key things that are required for, accountability, so to speak? They have to be ambitious. They can't be any schmo. Like they need to be ambitious. Like, what the hell? Like, why are we doing this for? The whole point of having an accountability buddy is not to hold my hand. It's to make sure that we collectively achieve. So there has to be mutual consent. There has to be mutual consent. If one person is better than the other, unless the person is willing to chase the other person aggressively, it's not going to work. Because the other person is going to feel like a mentor or a coach or a teacher. Nah, there's no time for any of that stuff. Okay? The other thing is there has to be a level of objectivity. I spoke about something called the psychological muscle, which is basically where you move away from just la 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 and just like taking everything in like you're some child, to a point of maturity where you look outside in, you're like, wow, I can clearly see that tree has green leaves. I can there's no confusion, should we say, kind of like what's happening in the world right now. So the point being made is that there needs to be clarity. There needs to be clarity, and that comes through objectivity, not letting the emotions get the better of you or them. Thirdly, there needs to be integrity. Is their word their bond? Do they say what they're going to do? If they say they're going to achieve something, is there evidence that they've actually tried in this effort? Because if you're coming to somebody who is consistently coming up with excuses again and again and again over weeks, what's the point? Why are you reporting back? They're just taking information from you. So there's no point. So, people have asked before, can it be my partner? Can it be my sibling? That depends on your character and relationship with them. And I can't say for most people or not, but what I would imagine is that because you're so emotionally tied to these people, it may not work, It may not work. Some partners want their own space, and that's perfectly fine. So maybe find someone else. Can it work with someone of the opposite sex? Yes, 100%. Of course it can. If anything, it may work better, but again, that depends on your characteristics. Can it be a person of the same sex? 100%. 100%, because there's naturally going to be a competitive edge there. Not to say that won't happen with the opposite sex. It may be a bit different. There may be a bit more symbiosis and synergy, but with the same sex, there's going to be a competitive edge. Usually, it doesn't matter if they're girl or woman. It doesn't matter if there's an undertone or overtone of it. That will exist in some way, shape, or form, because ego exists. And ego, people say get rid of your ego. I don't think so. Ego's there. It's not going away. You can minimize it and dilute it a bit, but ego is required for you to achieve. And so you can be strategic with this if need be. Okay. Now, you have to decide whether you want this to be a group thing, one-to-one, whether you want this to be face-to-face, a video call, whether it's going to be weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, or even quarterly, depending on your relationship. Maybe you want to initially do weekly and then eventually do monthly and then maybe do quarterly. Do you want to track this on things like Asana, Trello, Notion? I'd probably just say do it on Notion or Google Sheets. Okay, Notion is probably the best way because there's so much cool stuff you can do to it. You can create a simple Kanban board. However, if you don't even want to be complicated and you're like used to like Excel or Sheets, then just do that. Don't use anything else. And again, the things that you're focusing on, and I'm checking my sort of notes here, is you need to focus on the task that you guys are saying you want to focus on. Have no more than 2 or 3 tasks. Okay. Number 2, the time scales that you're giving yourself and what status each task is at. Number 3, what you've done. Number 4, what has worked. And number 4, what hasn't worked. And then also number 5, your lessons learned. Very important. Sometimes the time scale isn't as important. I've learned that time is unnecessarily pressurizing for a person like me. Like, I work well under pressure, but sometimes I can fold under pressure when it's my own personal goals. So I'm a bit more present. I know what my goals are, but I'm a bit more present, so to speak. It's different, okay? Give yourself enough times to speak. Like I said with my friend, okay, with my second accountability after the first initial one, we spoke for an hour each. With the one after that, we spoke for half an hour each. They both worked. It just depends on the relationship and the characters that are there. And again, feel free to share successes and failures in between sessions. Whether this is on WhatsApp, Telegram, text message, email, it doesn't really matter. Do what works for you. So this should give you a deep and thorough understanding of the power of accountability and how building the right relationships is key. And just a final note on the relationships piece. Stop being an annoying, boring, moody person if that is you. Show your edge, show your energy. We've had things that have happened in our lives, of course. So if that is the case, do the mature thing and find ways to manage those different stuff or overcome. Those things will never go away. I'm not going to be here to tell you that, but there are ways to counteract it. And that comes down to the people you meet. That comes down to the things that find you joy. That comes down to the things that connect with you meaningfully. And that comes down to love, essentially. And so if there is stuff in your environment that doesn't help, this could be people nagging in your ear all the time, reminding you of distress. This could be the environment that you're in and all the time you're seeing a certain thing. This could be the fact that you've had a certain loss or rejection or failure that has happened in your life. See if there are ways to mitigate against these different challenging or limiting beliefs. It's always good to really understand or write down what you truly believe as a person, and then really see if those beliefs are supporting or limiting. You need to even write down why you believe those things, because once you do your beliefs, why you believe those things, whether they're supporting or limiting, that gives you a clear idea of how your mind is working. Okay, this is usually beliefs of yourself, of other people, and the world. Those are the 3 different types on a basic level. And so once you've done that, you just want to be in a space where, again, from that exercise or other exercises, you've developed a level of self-awareness. You move into a space of self-management, so finding ways to manage self. So this is through, again, using things like my life navigation system or journaling or exercising or meditating or praying or walking, or literally through sort of like assisted meditation, thinking about where you're feeling different things in your body. What are your sensations like? All of this different stuff. When people say things, how you're feeling, all of that kind of stuff there. This is, again, the emotional intelligence model. because then you can use that stuff into social intelligence, which is the second part of the emotional intelligence model, which focuses purely on, again, being socially aware of how people interact and act, and also how you manage those relationships through influence, conflict management, leadership, all of this kind of stuff. That's how it works. That's how it all works, okay? So hopefully this has been useful and helpful to you. If it has been, please let me know. Please like this page and share it with, please like this video and share it with someone who you feel needs to hear it. You know, sharing is caring, as they say. And if there's any other topics you'd like to hear from me personally, please feel free to leave a comment below, because I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, if you want to hear more videos around life management, portfolio careers, and positive psychology, then feel free to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.